Now available in paperback and Kindle, All About Marilyn. Learn all about the struggles of a faded former teen sitcom star in this absolutely fabulous 5-star screenplay. Get All About Marilyn in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com today.
Hollywood Historical Men in Crisis. One of my viewers wanted me to do another installment in the Hollywood Historical Men in Crisis series. And for this installment in the Hollywood Historical Men in Crisis series, I'm going to be talking about troubled 1970s and 1980s child star Gary Coleman. Now, Gary Coleman is an iconic black child star of the 1970s and 1980s who is known for his signature role on the NBC sitcom Different Strokes. And on Different Strokes, Gary Coleman played the character of Arnold Jackson, a black orphan who is the younger brother of two boys who are adopted by a wealthy white man, Philip Drummond, who was played by Conrad Bain, at the request of their mother, who passed away and was Philip Drummond's maid, and requests that she adopt her two sons to give them a better life. And as Gary Coleman became very popular on this hit show Different Strokes, he was known for his iconic catchphrase, "What you talking about, Willis?" which he oftentimes said whenever he got into trouble and wanted to know what Willis had just said. Now, Gary Coleman enjoyed tremendous success as related to his role in Hollywood playing Arnold Jackson, and also went on to portray roles in films like On the Right Track, and also had a TV movie called The Kid with the Broken Halo, which was adapted into an animated series known as The Gary Coleman Show, and he also made appearances on shows like The Jeffersons, and it looked like Gary Coleman was on a road to great success and stardom. However, as he was having this success, sadly, this road to success in Hollywood put him on the road to becoming a man in crisis because his parents got caught up with the Hollywood bug, and as they got caught up with the Hollywood bug, they became stage parents. Now, Gary Coleman didn't start out with life in Hollywood. He started out actually being born on February 8th, 1968 in Zion, Illinois, and was adopted as an infant by W.G. Coleman, a pharmaceutical representative, and Edmonia Sue, who was a nurse practitioner. And these two middle-class black people, when they adopted Gary, thought they were going to get a healthy child. Unfortunately, Gary Coleman at birth was diagnosed with multiple health issues, including a congenital kidney defect known as nephritis, which required multiple surgeries and dialysis, and he had his first kidney transplant at the age of 5, and then a second one at 17 that wasn't successful. And sadly, due to his medical conditions, Gary Coleman's height was permanently stunted, keeping him at 4 feet 8 inches. However, in spite of these health issues, Gary Coleman was discovered by a talent scout at the Norman Lear Agency, who was looking for actors to star in a Little Rascals revival. Now, that project didn't take off. However, it led to Gary Coleman getting other opportunities, and those opportunities allowed him to play characters that were basically half his age, and his big break came when he was allowed to play the role of Arnold Jackson on Different Strokes, and as he played the younger brother, Arnold Jackson, to the older brother, Todd Bridges, he oftentimes made the common statement, "What you talking about, Willis?" in multiple episodes, which got him lots of laughs. And as he was getting lots of laughs and great success on Different Strokes, he was out here a rising star. And as a rising star, that's how he got to appear in films like On the Right Track and got to be in a TV movie, The Kid with the Broken Halo, and later on got an animated series based on him, which I saw as a kid on NBC, called The Gary Coleman Show. Now, as Gary Coleman was rising in Hollywood, his family created a production company, which was common for actors because most actors are a business. And since they are a business, they oftentimes create a business to manage their assets. And Gary Coleman's parents created a company because he was a minor to manage his business, known as the Gary Coleman Productions. Now, his parents were his managers, and as their managers, they wrote into their contract they would be his son's paid employees. Now, usually with child stars, what happens is most smart parents, what they do is leave the management to an individual who can remain objective. However, because Gary Coleman's parents got caught up in Hollywood and all of the clout chasing and all of the quest for status, because I believe they were disconnected from him since they adopted him, they didn't see Gary as a person. And because they didn't see Gary as a person, they basically saw Gary as a property, no different than a Hollywood agent or a Hollywood manager. I go in depth on this in the screenplay I wrote called All About Marilyn, where I talk about how most of the people in Hollywood don't see people as people, and that basically put Gary on the road to becoming a boy who was on the road to becoming a man in crisis, because instead of his parents looking to nurture and protect him, they just saw him as a piece of property. And because they saw him as a piece of property, they really did not go out here thinking to teach Gary Coleman the male life skills and male survival skills he would need to be able to navigate life when he was older. No, they just saw Gary Coleman as a way to make easy money because he was the cute little boy who would say, "What you talking about, Willis?" And as Different Strokes was going on, these parents weren't really understanding the business as related to entertainment. And because they really didn't understand the business as related to the entertainment, they basically thought that Gary Coleman's career was going to go on forever and that Different Strokes would continue to go on for years. However, in the entertainment business, especially back then in the 80s, a show usually ran about 5 to 7 years. And with a show running 5 to 7 years, you have to have a plan for what you want to do once the show ends. However, Gary Coleman's parents were not really good managers because they really didn't understand the entertainment industry. And because they didn't understand the entertainment industry, they didn't understand that when it came to TV shows, they come to an end. And because they come to an end, a star or a performer has to have a plan for what is considered to be the dark period between shows. Now, his parents didn't understand that you needed to have that plan for that dark period between shows, and that put Gary Coleman in a very dark place after Different Strokes wound up being canceled in 1986. Now, when Different Strokes got canceled in 1986 due to poor ratings and the whole landscape of black media changing due to Bill Cosby introducing The Cosby Show in 1984, Gary Coleman wasn't prepared to adapt. And because he wasn't prepared to adapt, he wasn't able to deal with the changing landscape as related to black media. And this, as related to him in his adolescence, put him on a road to becoming a man in crisis, because as a teenager, he was out here trying to navigate a world as related to his career, but the entire landscape of entertainment had changed. And with the entire landscape completely changing, Gary Coleman found himself in a world where nobody really wanted to see the Arnold Jackson character, who in 1986 was considered to be a stereotype at that point because Different Strokes as a sitcom was very racist and very paternalistic, and to many of the people who were watching the Cosby Show, like myself, we didn't see the show Different Strokes in a positive light anymore. So, with people not seeing Different Strokes in a positive light, the Gary Coleman's popularity started to decline. And as his popularity started to decline, he was typecast in the role of Arnold Jackson. And this whole situation of being typecast was exacerbated by Gary Coleman's whole health issues, which led to him winding up being 4 feet 8 inches tall and appearing like a child. So Gary Coleman was basically struggling with a changing media landscape and also struggling as related to dealing with a world of Hollywood that really didn't have a place for him anymore. And he thought he could go out here and be able to weather the storm of the rough period between TV shows by going to his trust fund, which was estimated to hold $18 million. And Gary Coleman, again, who was 18 years old at the time, soon found out that his entire trust only had $220,000. And this was a betrayal of Gary Coleman by his parents, and a betrayal by his parents because parents are supposed to look out for their children and make sure they're taken care of. And with a trust, they were not supposed to touch that money, but his parents showed that they were not trustworthy because they saw this adopted child not as a person, but they saw him as a property. And since they saw him as a property, they went out here making investments allegedly as related to his money, and sadly wound up squandering the over $18 million, leaving him with next to nothing. And leaving him with next to nothing, he basically just felt devastated because he was betrayed by those people who he was supposed to care for. And this basically led Gary Coleman, who at 18 years old, he had no support system. And with a lack of a support system in Hollywood, Gary Coleman went from being a boy who had no life skills or survival skills as related to being a man or being able to navigate a really treacherous place like Hollywood where everyone is cutthroat, to winding up on the road to becoming a man in crisis due to the dysfunctional way his parents were neglecting him emotionally because they didn't look to meet his emotional needs, and his adopted father, didn't look to teach him leadership skills or male life skills or give him guidance. Moreover, his agent didn't really look out for him because all they were thinking about was their 10%. So Gary Coleman went from being a successful star to becoming a man in crisis as he filed a lawsuit against the people who he was supposed to trust to take care of his trust. And he wound up suing his parents and his agent for misappropriating his trust fund because they weren't supposed to touch any of that money in his trust. Now, Gary Coleman did win the lawsuit as related to the lost $18 million, but he only got $3.8 million. And as he got this $3.8 million, he was dealing with depression as related to the betrayal of his parents and being seen not as a son, but seen as a property. And that basically crushed Gary Coleman. I know it could just hurt so badly to have someone you thought loved you not see you as a person. And this led to him becoming so depressed that he went to attempt suicide multiple times. And he attempted suicide multiple times because he just felt betrayed by the people he thought he could trust. And that was, again, made it where he could not focus on really adapting as related to building a new life. Now, Gary Coleman did try to build a new life, realizing that he was typecast as Arnold Jackson on Different Strokes, and could not really go out here and find a breakout role because of his body being 4 foot 11, I believe, or 4 foot 9, or no, it's 4 feet 8 inches. And with him being so short and being typecast as Arnold Jackson, he really could not go out here and find a role to break out. So he struggled as related to his life and went into semi-retirement, bouncing from Colorado and then to Arizona, and was trying to build a life out there, but he really couldn't. As he was trying to build this life with $3.8 million, expenses ate up everything. And when you're a man in crisis and you're in depression, you're not really thinking about how you're spending your money. Now, $3.8 million in the hands of somebody who was in a place where they were in a better place as related to their mental health, they could invest that money and live very well. But Gary Coleman was struggling again with his mental health issues as related to depression and attempting suicide, and feeling a low sense of self-worth, exacerbated by Hollywood, which only saw him as Arnold Jackson. And this basically led to him struggling as related to trying to rebuild his life. And when he couldn't find acting work, after in the 90s making appearances on shows like Fresh Prince, I Believe Martin, Married with Children, and the Keenan Ivory Wayans show, this is where he wound up with fiscal issues because he was trying to be able to try to find some work to be able to pay his bills as he was struggling with his money, because Gary Coleman didn't get the male life skills on how to manage money and manage his fiscal situation. What happened to Gary Coleman is he wound up struggling as relating to trying to pay his bills, and struggling with related to trying to maintain a life, because if you buy a home in Colorado or Arizona, that's going to cost a bit of money in them areas, especially if you have a nice area and you also get a car. I mean, that's going to cost money to build that life. So Coleman was struggling, and as he was struggling, he was becoming frustrated, and that's what led to him simmering and boiling in anger, which led to him having a hot temper. And as he had this hot temper, what he would do is explode in rage. And the reason why he exploded in rage is because his father never gave him guidance to navigate through his emotions. And yes, you can feel the emotion, but you have to learn not to act on the emotion. And as a result of this, Gary Coleman got into several incidents where he had high-profile assaults. And I believe what happened with those assaults is he possibly had to pay settlements, which basically took away from that $3.8 million he had. Now he was charged with assault for punching a woman who sought an autograph, and pleaded no contest to that, and had to pay the hospital bills for that woman. And that was in 1998, and in 2007 he was arrested for disorderly conduct for getting into an heated argument with his girlfriend Shannon Price at the time. And this is what led to him again having these kind of incidents that basically made it look like his life was falling apart, and it was, because he was a man in crisis. And as he was having these incidents, he then got again married to Shannon Price, but things wound up falling apart in that relationship because Gary Coleman was just deeply frustrated about the state of his life, not being able to have success as a man because of the being typecast as related to being a child, and not having anybody to support him or trust him. So Gary Coleman wound up becoming a man in crisis who simmered and boiled in anger as related to his life, and he tried to rebuild his life, but things just never really came together. And it didn't come together because he didn't have the male life skills or male survival skills to know how to navigate life in this world, and because he didn't get that from his parents or people in Hollywood that would look out for him. He was basically alone, and he became frustrated because he didn't know how to make life work as a black man. Now, when it comes to being a black man, you have to understand it's completely different from being a white or a non-black man. And being a black man, you need to have a specific set of male life skills and male survival skills in order to be able to know how to navigate a course in life that will allow you to be able to survive. Unfortunately, Gary Coleman didn't get that because his parents went out and put him in Hollywood. And as they got him in Hollywood, they bought into the narrative of the rainbow. And sadly, as they bought into the narrative of the world that is colorless, what happened was Gary Coleman wound up getting lost. And as he wound up getting lost, he wound up getting exploited and taken advantage of, and had no understanding of how to make life work in the world. And as he got frustrated as related to trying to make life in the world, and when he couldn't again find acting jobs, and he couldn't even get regular work as a security guard, he wound up struggling and again wound up filing for bankruptcy because he didn't know how to manage his money or have a plan to manage money. Because again, $3.8 million you just put in the bank you can live off the interest if you know how to manage it. And if you know how to do different ventures, you can make that money work for you. Unfortunately, Gary Coleman didn't know how to do this, and he didn't know how to manage his money and be able to manage a plan like many other child stars who wind up in the same situation. He didn't understand you could also work as related to doing things like Comic-Cons and toy shows as a revenue stream, but he had nobody there to teach him any way to manage money or manage a plan, and that's how he wound up getting himself jammed up, where he looked to get married to this Shannon Price around, I think, about 2006 or 2007. And as he got married, he hoped that this would get him some publicity. But sadly, that marriage wound up falling apart because Gary Coleman was frustrated about the state of his life. And as he got frustrated about the state of his life, this led to him winding up in a domestic dispute with his wife. And this led to him getting more charges. And this led to him eventually having a domestic violence incident where he was arrested and placed in jail overnight as related to his wife. And after he wound up divorcing his wife, Gary Coleman sadly had some health issues, and these health issues caused him to have a seizure on the set of The Insider on 2010. Then, when he had a fall in his home where he fell down some stairs. He wound up with an intracranial hemorrhage, and sadly, this intracranial hemorrhage sadly led to the passing of Gary Coleman. And as Gary Coleman wound up passing, sadly, he wound up losing his life. And instead of him going on to be one of the iconic stars of the 1980s, his life ended with him in a ignominious fashion, being known as a man in crisis. And this man in crisis sadly wound up passing away. And instead of him being seen as an iconic star whose life would be celebrated, he wound up passing away and wound up becoming a footnote in history of Hollywood and black entertainment. And as he became this footnote in history and black entertainment, Gary Coleman sadly went on from being one of the great stars of the late 1970s and 1980s to a footnote in Hollywood history as a Hollywood historical man in crisis. And his story really was something that really made me think about my screenplay All About Marilyn and what happens to faded former teen sitcom stars and child stars. They wind up being a major star that inspires a generation of kids, but as they get older, because they don't have a family and a support system, they wind up becoming on a road to struggling. And as they struggle, a lot of stars like Gary Coleman don't wind up growing up to become men. No, they wind up growing up and sadly having their life end as men in crisis. Now, if you want to learn more about what leads to many people winding up on the road to the struggles of becoming a man in crisis, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find The Man Crisis at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble. And if you want to learn why teen sitcom stars and child stars deal with a lot of struggles after their TV shows end, you can pick up my screenplay all about Marilyn in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com. And if you want to see me make more videos about Hollywood historical men or women in crisis, you can send a donation to the PayPal or the Cash App by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, all about Nikki, a fabulous first season. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air meets Clueless in this absolutely fabulous African-American 1990s teen sitcom. Get all 13 episodes of All About Nikki, the fabulous first season, in paperback and e-readers today. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Now available in paperback, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.